Hi, and thanks for taking the time to join us for today's webinar. By hosting this online, we're hoping we'll be able to accommodate folks from all over the state that are interested in gleaning in their communities. If you have any questions, comments, or would like me to clarify anything during today's webinar, feel free to leave them in the comments below or send them to me directly. Should you like to reach out to me directly, you can find my contact information at the end of this video. With all that said, let's begin. Today's webinar is the fifth in a 6-part webinar series we're calling our Master Gleaner Training. We've put this together as a means of training people throughout the state on how GleanKY's model works, with the hopes of making it more readily available to those interested in seeing gleaning happening in their communities. I'm hoping to have both longtime volunteer leaders as well as people completely new to gleaning in this course as a way for all of us to be on the same page and so we can all learn from each other. This webinar will take a quick look at the communication tools and techniques that we found most successful when it comes to managing gleaning work, whether you're communicating with sources of produce, volunteer gleaners, or recipient groups. If you're still pretty new to GleanKY and haven't seen the first 4 webinars yet, I would definitely recommend going back to see them before viewing this webinar. They should provide a good foundation on how GleanKY was founded, how to find people to support gleaning work in your community, as well as the basics of staying safe while gleaning. All 4 of those webinars should be linked in the description of this video and can be found at any time through our YouTube channel. So, like in all our other webinars, I think it's useful to view communication through the lens of our 3-part model. There are things to think about when you're communicating with each of our stakeholder types. It's not enough to simply approach everyone with a one-size-fits-all approach. Some of these elements are simpler to communicate with than others, but without good communication in place at each of these roles, produce source, gleaners, and produce recipients, gleaning will be difficult to sustain, if not impossible. Before you ever send an email to all your volunteers or call a recipient to tell them about all the produce you're bringing to them, it's important to have a good system for managing your contacts in place. Keep track of the name, the phone number, and email address for each person you meet while talking about gleaning, and make a note about how they might best fit into your work. For example, if you meet someone who works at a produce farm, make a note that they could be a potential source. If you meet someone from a church mission group, they might be someone to call when you need volunteer gleaners. Spreadsheets are free. Rather than dumping every single name you have into a single spreadsheet, make multiple documents, one each for sources, gleaners, and recipients to help you keep everything organized. And on some regular basis, it can be good to send your list of contacts along to someone at our central office. We'll be able to add these people to our monthly email newsletter, which keeps them up to date on what work we're doing as an organization. The more frequently your contacts hear about gleaning, the more familiar they'll be when you reach out to them to come glean with you. When it comes to communicating with sources of produce, there's not much to it. But there's also not many tricks or shortcuts you can take. Produce donors are likelier to reach out to you, and they require a personal touch when communicating with them. Whenever you hear from a produce source, whether over the phone or via email, it's important to respond to them quickly, even if you don't think you'll be able to glean their produce right away. If the produce donor hears back from you quickly, they're more likely to be willing to work with you to find a time to have you come and glean. If you take too long to communicate with them, they may look for other avenues of offloading their excess produce or simply throw it out. After you glean, it can make a big difference to follow up with the produce donor to say thank you and to let them know a little bit more about where their donation was delivered. It's important to be sure you're communicating with your volunteers at least once per month. This lets them know that you're staying busy with gleaning work and that there are very real things for them to plug into as volunteers. This can look as simple as an email to your full list simply outlining the work that your group has done over the last month or so. If you don't have the time or wherewithal to do this yourself, you can always send your contacts to me, and I'll be sure they're receiving a monthly newsletter from us. Either way, this regular communication helps keep people in the loop with Gleaning and makes them more likely to respond to you when you need their help. When you schedule a Gleaning and need people to glean, there are two good ways to get them signed up to help you. The first is to send out an email to your list of Gleaners. Be clear in both your subject line and the body of the email about what you're wanting their help with, when you're going to need their help, and where. It's not important to put every single detail in this initial email, but you'll want to give them enough information to let them decide if they can help you. Once they've expressed their interest in Gleaning, you can always follow up with more details, like driving directions to the farm, or what you recommend they wear, and more. Again, if they're used to hearing from you regularly via email, they'll be more willing to respond when you reach out. Over the last couple years, we've developed a new tool that we call our Rapid Response System. It basically functions as a contact list which allows you to send a text message to a large group of people all at once. It's a great way to reach your Gleaners on short notice, especially when you just need one or two additional Gleaners to help you out. Unlike emailing, you'll be limited to 140 characters in what you send via the Rapid Response List. So, being clear and concise is even more important here. Make sure you include a date, a time, a general location of the glean, what you'll be gleaning, and how they can follow up with you for more information. Here's a good example of a message that conveys all that information within the limited space you're allowed. Gleaners needed tomorrow morning, 7:31, from 9 to 11 a.m. to harvest tomatoes in Woodford County. Respond for more info and to RSVP. Just like with communication over email, the more you use the Rapid Response List, the more likely people will be to respond to your requests. The majority of the time you'll be communicating with your recipient agencies is when you expect to have a bunch of gleaned produce to distribute, or if you already have it. When this is the case, the most direct way of reaching them is by calling them on the phone. This way, you can find out within a couple of minutes whether an agency can accept the produce you have for them. When calling, you'll want to be able to let them know how much produce you have for them, what kind of produce you have, and when they can expect you to deliver it. Showing up unexpectedly to an agency with a bunch of produce can sometimes be more a burden than a blessing. Around the same time we created our Rapid Response List, we used the same system to put together what we call our bumper crop list. Where the Rapid Response System allows us to communicate with many Gleaners all at once, the bumper crop list allows us to communicate with many recipient groups all at the same time. When you have more produce than a single agency can receive, this can be a great way to quickly spread the word. Much the same as the Rapid Response List, you'll be limited in the number of letters you have at your disposal when using the bumper crop list. So be sure to include what you have, how much you have, and a time window for delivery. And if you have some extra letters left over, it can also be helpful to include a picture of the produce you have, just so your recipients know what to expect. Here's an example of what a good bumper crop message can look like. Available for delivery this afternoon, 7:31, from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Tomatoes and tomatillos. Respond to this message with how much you'd like. Generally, when looking for recipients, it helps to line up your deliveries before you even go out to glean. This ensures you're able to get the produce from point A to point B as quickly as possible and without the need of storage. As more and more people become interested in gleaning, it's important that we find ways to manage that work as easily and efficiently as possible. Hopefully, these tools and tips provide you a good way to reduce the amount of time you spend managing your communication and can give you more time to actually get out and glean. Across the board, people are going to be more responsive when you're consistent in the way you communicate with them. Even if you don't get much response from your contacts at first, keep up with it, and you should begin to see better results. If you need help utilizing these tools, you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I'll work with you to get your things set up for you to use. That wraps up today's topic, all about communication strategies for sources of produce, volunteer gleaners, and recipient agencies. On our final webinar, to be posted on September 30, I'll be talking about the things you can do to retain and improve your relationships with gleaning stakeholders and to move towards making gleaning a more permanent part of your community. Should you have any questions about the material I've covered today, don't hesitate to reach out to me and ask. I've left my contact information on the screen if there's anything you'd like to speak with me more about in depth. Otherwise, thank you for joining us with this webinar, and I look forward to having you in for our next one.